Hi, everyone. Thank you for choosing to be here and for opening your hearts to a conversation that, for many centuries, was silenced, hidden, or misunderstood. Today, I wish to invite you on a journey, a remembering really, back into relationship with a sacred presence who has always been with us. She is the whisper in the wind, the rhythm in the tides, the still small voice in your own heart. She is the divine feminine. This is not simply a theological concept, nor merely a poetic metaphor. It is a truth as ancient as time and as intimate as your own breath. Yet so often, our spiritual traditions have spoken to us mainly of the masculine face of God, as Father, King, or Lord, while the feminine has been left in the shadows or reduced to silence. Today, I'd like to shine a light into those shadows. I'd like to offer you not only an introduction to the divine feminine, but also a deeper look at some powerful feminine archetypes who have shaped spiritual consciousness for thousands of years. Eve and Isis, Mother Mary, and Mary Magdalene. Because in understanding their stories and reclaiming their truths, we begin to restore the sacred balance within ourselves, our communities, and our world. So let's begin simply. What is the divine feminine? She is the aspect of the divine that embodies intuition, creation, compassion, wisdom, nurturance, sensuality, transformation, and the cycles of life. She is not bound by gender. Though we call her she, the divine feminine dwells within every being, regardless of whether we are male, female, non-binary, or any other beautiful expression of humanity. She's the ocean's tide, rising and falling in perfect rhythm. She is the fertile soil, holding seeds in darkness until the right moment for growth. She is the moon, waxing and waning, reminding us that life, too, has phases. She is the fierce mother bear, defending her cubs, and the gentle caress of a lover's hand. The divine feminine does not ask us to abandon the masculine. She calls us instead into sacred union, the balance of masculine and feminine energies both within ourselves and in the world. This balance is what many traditions refer to as the sacred marriage, a mystical alchemy that births wholeness, creativity, and peace. To understand why the divine feminine has been lost or suppressed, we have to go back to the beginning, to the archetype of Eve. In the book of Genesis, Eve is described as the first woman, created as a companion for Adam. We are told that she was tempted by the serpent to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and in doing so, she brought sin into the world. For centuries, Eve has been blamed for the so-called fall of man. She became a symbol of disobedience, temptation, and shame. But let us look deeper. In the mystical traditions, there's another way to see Eve. She is the one who reached for knowledge, who dared to seek wisdom, who longed to know the fullness of the divine mystery. She represents the awakening of consciousness. Her story is not simply one of shame. It's also a story of courage and curiosity. And here's something fascinating to consider. Long before the written story of Eve, there was Isis, the great mother goddess of Egypt. Some of you may wonder how Isis can come before Eve when Genesis is so ancient. So let's explore that. Historically speaking, Isis appears in human culture earlier than the written Genesis story. The worship of Isis dates back at least 4,500 years in Egypt, thriving through pharaonic times and later spreading through the Roman Empire. The stories about Eve come from the Hebrew scriptures, whose written forms emerged around 3,000 to 2,500 years ago, though earlier oral traditions may have existed. So in purely historical terms, the goddess Isis was known and worshipped long before Eve's story was written down. But there's also a symbolic truth here. Isis embodies the primordial mother archetype, a cosmic feminine force representing creation, magic, healing, and the power to resurrect life from death. Eve, too, is a mother archetype, called in Genesis the mother of all the living. Yet her story was filtered through a patriarchal lens and cast into shame and blame. Many scholars and mystics believe that Eve's story may be a recasting of much older goddess traditions, including those of Isis, Inanna, Asherah, and other divine feminine figures. In other words, Eve may be a later echo of the same archetypal feminine energy that Isis represents. So when we say Isis came before Eve, we mean historically Isis was worshipped earlier. Archetypally, the divine feminine existed long before Genesis. Spiritually, Eve's narrative might reflect the shift away from goddess-centered spirituality toward patriarchal religious systems. Reconnecting with figures like Isis helps us see Eve differently, not as the cause of humanity's downfall, but as a seeker of wisdom, a courageous feminine archetype who dared to awaken consciousness. This shift in perspective heals the ancient wound that labeled feminine wisdom as dangerous or sinful. I have a poem. Before Eve tasted the fruit, Isis raised her wings. Before the serpent spoke, the goddess whispered secrets of life and death. The names change, but the mother remains, always there, always sacred. Isis was a healer, a magician, a queen. She resurrected her beloved Osiris after he was slain and scattered into pieces. She is the archetype of devotion, magic, and feminine power. In many ways, Eve and Isis are two faces of the same archetype. Both are women who seek knowledge, who stand at the threshold between life and death, who hold the keys to transformation. When patriarchal societies began suppressing goddess worship, the story of Eve was twisted into a warning against feminine wisdom and power. This wound still echoes in our world today. It's why women have been silenced, why our intuition has been called irrational, why sexuality has been shamed rather than honored as sacred. Reclaiming Eve and remembering Isis is the first step in healing this ancient wound. Now let's turn to another powerful embodiment of the divine feminine, Mother Mary. In Christianity, Mary is revered as the mother of Jesus. Often depicted as meek, quiet, and pure, she's been held up as the ideal of womanhood, humble and obedient. But there's so much more to her story. Mary was a woman of extraordinary spiritual strength. She received a divine message from an angel and said yes to something utterly radical, to become the vessel of divine incarnation. She endured suspicion, hardship, and sorrow, yet remained steadfast. She is not just the mother of Jesus. She is the embodiment of divine grace, compassion, and the Holy Womb. In the mystical Christian tradition, Mary is sometimes called the new Eve. Where Eve was cast as the one who brought sin, Mary became the one who brought redemption. But again, we can see this not as punishment of one woman over another, but as the cyclical dance of feminine archetypes. Mary embodies the Divine Mother in all her forms: nurturer, protector, intercessor. In Catholicism, she is honored as the Queen of Heaven. In Eastern Christianity, she is called Theotokos, meaning God-bearer. In many Marian apparitions, from Lourdes to Fatima to Guadalupe, Mary has appeared bringing messages of peace, warning, and divine love. She is the face of the feminine who consoles us in our suffering and reminds us that even in our deepest pain, we are not alone. And now we come to Mary Magdalene, one of the most misunderstood figures in spiritual history. For centuries, Mary Magdalene was labeled as a repentant prostitute, an image created largely through church tradition rather than scripture. Yet in the Gospels, there is no evidence that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. Instead, she is described as a devoted disciple, one from whom Jesus cast out 7 demons. She stood at the cross when almost all others fled. She went to the tomb before dawn, and she was the first to witness the risen Christ. It was Mary Magdalene who received the instruction, "Go to my brothers and tell them," making her, in the words of early Christians, the apostle to the apostles. Beyond the canonical Gospels, ancient texts like the Gospel of Mary, discovered in Egypt in the late 19th century, painted a radically different picture. In these writings, Mary Magdalene is portrayed as a teacher, mystic, and close confidant of Jesus. In the Gospel of Mary, she comforts the grieving disciples and shares teachings about the soul's ascent beyond the material world. Her wisdom provokes jealousy among the male disciples, particularly Peter, who questions why Jesus would speak to a woman so intimately. Mary Magdalene represents the divine feminine in a unique way. She is the embodiment of the sacred union of the masculine and feminine. She was a follower, yes, but also a leader, a mystic, and possibly the carrier of secret teachings about the divine nature within us all. In many mystical traditions, Mary Magdalene is associated with the sacred bride archetype, the feminine counterpart in the divine union, just as Sophia is wisdom to the Logos. Some even believe that Jesus and Mary Magdalene shared a sacred partnership, not only as man and woman, but as representatives of the union of divine masculine and divine feminine energies. Reclaiming Mary Magdalene is essential to restoring the divine feminine. She reminds us that spiritual authority does not belong solely to men. She shows us that love, intimacy, and spiritual power are not separate, but deeply intertwined. So how does all this connect to you, to me, to our daily lives? The divine feminine is not only cosmic, she lives within us. When you listen to your intuition, when you create art, music, or poetry, when you comfort a crying child, when you stand in your truth, even if your voice trembles, when you dance or laugh or weep, you are embodying the divine feminine. Whether you're a man or a woman, or anything in between, you carry both masculine and feminine energies. To awaken the divine feminine is to allow yourself to soften and to receive, to trust the wisdom of your body, to feel your emotions without shame, to honor beauty as sacred. She teaches us that strength and softness can coexist, that power does not always roar, sometimes it whispers. Here are some gentle practices to help you reconnect with her presence. Daily stillness. Sit in silence for 5 minutes, simply breathing and listening inwardly. Ritual. Light a candle in honor of the divine feminine. Offer a prayer or intention. Journaling. Ask yourself, where is the divine feminine showing up in my life today? Nature connection. Spend time outside, touching the earth, feeling the wind. Sacred study. Read texts like the Gospel of Mary. Proverbs is personification of wisdom, or poetry from mystics who honor the feminine. Movement. Dance, sway, stretch. Let your body express your spirit. Self-compassion. Speak kindly to yourself, as Mary or Isis would speak to you. As we draw to a close, I'd like to share this simple invocation. Divine Mother, she who is known by 1,000 names, Mary, Magdalene, Isis, Eve, Lady of the Moon, Keeper of Wisdom, Sacred Flame of Compassion, we remember you. We call you back into our hearts, our communities, our world. Help us heal the wounds of separation. Teach us to honor the sacred balance of all things. Guide us to embody your grace, your power, and your love. May we become vessels of your wisdom. May we remember that we are worthy, whole, and holy. and may we birth a new world together. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering. May the divine feminine bless you all. If this message speaks to your soul, I invite you to further explore, study the sacred texts, meditate on the faces of the divine feminine. Let her reveal herself to you in your dreams, your art, your quiet moments. She's never left us. She's waiting to be known through us, as us.